Hello, welcome to the review of the Division II legislation adopted at the 2022 NCAA Convention. My name is Jordan Lizak, and I'm an Assistant Director on the Division II Academic and Membership Affairs team. This presentation will provide you with an overview of the 7 proposals that were adopted by the membership at the 2022 NCAA Convention. So, let's dive right into the Division II legislation adopted at Convention. With the adoption of Proposal Number 2022-1, the Division II President's Council may adopt emergency legislation when significant values or harms are at stake and the use of the regular legislative cycle is likely to cause undue hardship to the association or the Division II membership due to the delay in its effective date. Further, the deadline related to the special convention for division-dominant and federated provisions sponsored by the President's Council went from 90 to 30 days. Finally, the President's Council may now sponsor and adopt resolutions at any time, with those resolutions being ratified by the Division II membership at the next regularly scheduled NCAA convention. Prior to the adoption of 2022-1, the Division II President's Council, or, in the interim between meetings of the President's Council and the Management Council, the Administrative Committee, had the authority to adopt emergency legislation when the NCAA needed to respond to or comply with a court order, ADR, or government order, or when the President's Council deemed it appropriate to limit or avoid NCAA liability as a result of litigation, ADR, or governmental proceeding. The President's Council also had the authority to adopt resolutions that were temporary in nature. Further, the President's Council was able to call a special convention of Division II to vote on amendments to division-dominant and federated provisions. Due to COVID-19, there were instances where the division needed to act immediately, but the action did not fit under the scope of the emergency authority or resolution requirements. This proposal enhances scope of emergency legislation so that the division can act accordingly. In addition, the change permits the adoption of a resolution at a time other than convention while still requiring final ratification at the convention. Finally, with advances in technology and possible solutions that require a more expedient resolution, it is possible to arrange for a special convention in a much shorter period of time if needed. This proposal had an immediate effective date. The adoption of Proposal 2022-2 establishes a third processing option for NCAA major violations called negotiated resolution. This processing option is available for all those major violations where the involved institution, the involved individuals, and the NCAA enforcement staff agree with the facts, and that the violations are major, and they are willing to negotiate the application of major penalties. The parties may work together to submit a negotiated resolution for the Division II Committee on Infractions review. The proposed penalties derive from Bylaw 1952, which is a legislative list of possible penalties for major violations, as well as any relevant Committee on Infractions case precedent. After the agreement is finalized, the parties submit the negotiated resolution to the Committee on Infractions, who may approve the negotiated resolution or reject it. The Committee on Infractions standard of review to reject a negotiated resolution is when the committee considers the negotiated resolution not in the best interests of the association or the penalties are manifestly unreasonable. Following the NCAA Division II Management Council and President's Council review of an increase in Division II major infractions cases in recent years, the NCAA Division II Enforcement and Infractions Task Force was created and charged with studying recent changes in the Division I infractions process and recommending legislative and policy changes to enhance the Division II infractions process. Upon review of the successful implementation of the Division I negotiated resolution process, the Division II Enforcement and Infractions Task Force recommended that this concept go before the Division II membership at the 2022 convention. With an immediate effective date, the Division II membership may avail themselves of the process provided they meet the requirements of the legislation. Turning to Proposal 2022-3, as adopted, the proposal eliminates the option for an individual to sign a written release or waiver declining the sickle cell solubility test as specified. Since there is now an opportunity for schools to efficiently and effectively manage the administrative and privacy burdens tied to the test, the benefits related to the appropriate monitoring of sickle cell trait positive student athletes supports the idea of consistent mandatory testing across institutions as established in this amendment. The Committee on Competitive Safeguards of Medical Aspects of Sport does not intend that a positive test become the basis for an automatic grounds for disqualification from athletics participation. Rather, test information should be used by institutional and other applicable medical staff to provide individualized medical monitoring and care. This proposal will become effective on August 1, 2022. Under 2022-4, the notification of transfer, one-time transfer, and financial aid legislation changed in a few ways. For those student-athletes who wish to transfer for the 2022-23 academic year, the transfer legislation now requires an undergraduate transfer student-athlete to complete an educational module related to transferring before an institution may enter the student-athlete's information into the NCAA transfer portal. Please note, a transfer student-athlete will still be required to provide the institution with written notification of transfer. The proposal just added an additional requirement for an undergraduate transfer student-athlete to satisfy prior to being able to be put into the NCAA transfer portal. Once an institution receives both written notification of transfer and receipt of the completion of the educational module, an institution must place the student-athlete into the NCAA transfer portal within 7 consecutive calendar days from receiving the written notification of transfer or receipt of completion of the educational module, whichever occurs later. It also requires the head coach of the certifying institution and the student-athlete to certify in writing that no athletic staff member or other representatives of the institution's athletics interest communicated or made contact with the student-athlete or any individual associated with the student-athlete directly or indirectly without first obtaining authorization through the notification of transfer process. It also eliminated the previous institution's ability to object to the one-time transfer exception. A student-athlete must now provide written notification to their institution by June 15th. However, this date is not applicable to mid-year transfers. June 15th is important for student-athletes, compliance administrators, and coaches to keep in mind, as this date must be adhered to this year, June 15th, 2022, for student-athletes to have access to the one-time transfer exception to be eligible for the 2022-23 academic year upon transfer. Finally, the proposal permits an institution to reduce or cancel an athletics aid agreement previously signed for the next academic year. This proposal had an immediate effective date for student-athletes transferring for the 2022-23 academic year and thereafter. A student-athlete may now utilize a maximum of 6 credit hours earned during the summer term in a voluntary or optional minor to satisfy the credit hour requirements for meeting progress toward degree. Previously, institutions would be required to file various pieces of paperwork to allow a student-athlete to declare their desired voluntary or optional minor as their major for the summer, even if such a decision by the student-athlete was made because of limited course offerings during the academic year. The adopted legislation works to eliminate the additional step for the institution. This proposal provides additional opportunities for student-athletes to balance their class schedules throughout the year without having a negative impact on meeting progress towards degree requirements. With the immediate effective date, student-athletes may use courses taken over the 2022 summer term to satisfy progress toward degree requirements. Starting with the 2022-23 academic year, all countable athletically related activities will be prohibited on the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. This will be in place every year and will apply to all sports. This new legislation provides student-athletes with more opportunities to participate in civic engagement activities, such as voting, volunteering, and community engagement on an annual basis. Further, this allows Division II student-athletes the ability to have focused time to civically engage, including time to vote in presidential and some congressional, state, and local elections, and provides them with more opportunities to amplify their voice. Overall, this new legislation supports Division II SAC's total package student-athlete goal that encourages student-athletes to be well-rounded and exercise their right to vote. Finally, the football preseason and out-of-season athletically related activities legislation saw a few changes with the adoption of 2022-8. This proposal extends the 5-day acclimatization period to 7 days, with one required day off, establishes protective equipment and contact restrictions for the acclimatization period, as well as for preseason activities that occur after the acclimatization period as specified. And finally, it eliminates the restriction on the number of student-athletes per group that may engage in skill instruction. With its adoption, during the 7-day acclimatization period, the amendment allows an institution to use helmets and spider pads only during the first 2 days of practice or testing activity, helmets, shoulder, and spider pads only during the next 3 days of practice or testing activity, and full pads on the 6th day of practice or testing activity. Further, this proposal also requires 1 day off during the 7-day acclimatization period, which may occur as early as the 2nd day or as late as the 7th day. After the 7-day acclimatization period, but still during the preseason period, an institution must conduct a minimum of 5 practices of helmets only with the use of spider pads as optional, and may conduct a maximum of 8 on-field practices with full pads. The remaining practices may include helmets only, spider pads being permitted, or helmets and shoulder pads with no tackling to the ground. Additionally, there may be no more than 2 consecutive days of full contact practices and no more than 60 minutes of contact practice on 2 consecutive days per week. Finally, there may be no more than 75 minutes of full contact in any practice session, excluding scrimmages, and no more than 2 scrimmages during the preseason. Please note, full contact is only permitted during an on-field practice session with full pads. This amended legislation was developed with feedback from multiple stakeholders, including student-athletes, coaches, practitioners, institutional medical personnel, and conferences, and the revisions to the football playing and practice season model make several changes to the preseason practice period intended to enhance student-athlete safety. The changes to the acclimatization period better align with existing research related to transitioning into football activities. Further, the other revisions reduce the maximum number of full contact practices that could occur during the preseason from 17 to 9 and establish limits on the amount of contact that may occur during the preseason while retaining flexibility for programs regarding how to structure that period. Finally, the proposal eliminated the group size limit when football is taking part in skill instruction. This now aligns football with all other Division II sports and provides better balance for Division II coaches without negatively impacting student-athlete health and safety. This proposal had an immediate effective date. Well, there you have it. That concludes the overview of the 7 Division II proposals adopted at the 2022 NCAA Convention. Please be on the lookout for future regional rules sessions this spring and summer.